everybody, and welcome to 2M Football.
I'm Mike.
And I'm Matt. And we are rounding off our third team here in the AFC West.
And our third team we're covering also happens to be the third place team in the AFC West.
God, isn't it funny how this works out?
It's funny how that, yeah. And it's the Denver Broncos, who had a 9-7 record in 2016. And that 9-7 record wasn't good enough to get them into the playoffs, so their season ended there. So I would say, coming off their Super Bowl victory without Peyton Manning, the Broncos knew they were going to have questions to answer as they were looking for a new offensive identity.
But what's funny, and I'm going to throw this shot out here, is they didn't struggle as much as Carolina. There are questions that must be answered, but they didn't have the collapse that some teams deal with after the Super Bowl.
Right, 9-7 is not bad. In other divisions, that would have been enough to get into the playoffs. So we all know about that offseason trade that sent Brock Osweiler to the Texans, and that left Trevor Siemian, who was a 2015 7th-round pick, and then Paxton Lynch, who was the team's first-rounder this past year, as the quarterbacks on the roster. I think Mark Sanchez was there for a while, but he didn't end up playing.
Oh, butt fumble McGee.
And the offense did struggle all year, and injuries were a part of it. The team actually started out 4-0, and they were 7-3 after their Week 11 bye. But things really went off the rails after that, though, and they lost 4 of their last 6, and ended up missing out on a playoff berth in what's now the ultra-competitive AFC West all of a sudden.
And they also suffered a huge loss, and for those of you who don't know, Gary Kubiak called it quits.
That's right.
And I think that's a huge loss to this team.
Yeah, it is. It's going to hurt. It's going to hurt the offense that's already struggling. But for now, let's jump into their offense stats from last year. They averaged 20.8 points per game, which was 22nd in the league. They put up 323 yards per game, which was 27th. 230 pass yards per game, 22nd. And 93 rush yards per game, which was 27th. So bottom of the league in all categories. So a quarterback, we mentioned they've got 2 guys, Trevor Siemian, who started most of the season, and Paxton Lynch, the rookie first-round pick from last year. Siemian started 14 games this year, completed almost 60% of his passes for 3,400 yards and 18 touchdowns with 10 interceptions. And he averaged 7 yards per pass attempt.
Which, in all honesty, think about his position. So Peyton Manning was there last year. Behind him was Brock Osweiler. And then technically, Paxton Lynch was the third string. Or not Paxton Lynch, Trevor Siemian.
Yeah.
So in reality, everyone assumed Osweiler would step up. But then we all know, like you said, the Texas fiasco.
Yep.
So essentially, they went from Peyton Manning to the third string is now the starter.
Yeah, and he wasn't awful.
No, there were growing pains.
18 to 10 touchdown interception ratio isn't too bad, but he definitely didn't light up opposing defenses. And it'll be interesting to see what happens next year, because drafting Paxton Lynch in the first round is an indicator that they want to be preparing him to take over the starting role at some point. And he did get to play a little bit this year. He appeared in 3 games, started 2 because of injuries to Siemian. He completed 59% of his passes for 497 yards, 6 average per attempt, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. But he definitely needs time to develop. I took a look at his Week 5 game against Atlanta, which is one of the ones he started. In this game, he completed 23 of 35 passes for 220 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. And he also took 6 sacks for 40 yards lost in this game.
Oops.
And right.
That's great for a developing young quarterback.
Right. Well, I would say that most of them were on him, though. Like, he should have thrown it away, or there were receivers open that he didn't notice. And we'll get to the offensive line, which wasn't good either this year, but some of those would have been avoidable by other quarterbacks.
And this is something that I know we've talked about just on the side and stuff, is these college offenses, the way they run versus the NFL. And I don't think we've ever brought this up on our talk.
Yeah, I don't think so.
But a lot of college offenses are what they call run and gun. And if you ever watch a college game, and I'm not talking like Ohio State, Michigan, like the Big Ten people, you notice these quarterbacks cover their ears and look to the sideline. Now, in college, just like the NFL, they have transmitters. What they're doing is they're literally giving them the play. The quarterback's reciting it, and they run it. Quarterbacks don't read a defense in college, at least not in many colleges. So what happens is when they come into the NFL now, you have this whole nother adjustment, which is why you see a lot of these first-rounders sit a while. Very rarely, or not too often, do you see someone drafted and then immediately a starter,
right,
unless they're in a really bad spot. Because you have to learn how these things work. You have to learn how to read, adjust your play calling, set pass protection. And it's a whole nother realm. Almost a different world for these quarterbacks.
Yeah, it is. And another thing that you have to get used to is the speed of NFL receivers and the routes they run just aren't quite the same as in college. They're better, they're faster. And I think that was something he struggled with because he looked very inaccurate in this Atlanta game, throwing consistently behind his receivers, or he missed high a few times, and he was actually lucky not to have a lot more interceptions because there are a lot of tipped balls from passes that he threw too high for his receivers. But he's the QB of the future, and I do think he needs more time to develop, though. And a rumor that I've heard a lot that makes some sense in my head is that the Broncos might be interested in bringing in Tony Romo for a couple years. And Matt has strong opinions about Tony Romo, but let me just say my thing first. To me, it makes a lot of sense for them to bring in a veteran like Romo to be a bridge quarterback while they continue to develop Lynch for another year or two. And I think that's honestly all Romo has left, probably. 1 or 2 more years as a starter. And he's expected to be cut by Dallas at some point this offseason. I think it would be a good option for Denver to bring him in. Rebuttal, Matt.
Romo's done as a starter. It's only
No way. He's starting somewhere next year.
And what? Play 3 games before he's back on the bench with an injury? No. Romo's career, he is a veteran backup at this point. I don't like taking chances with someone who in the past few seasons has done nothing but rally up. And major injuries, especially to your back, broke his collarbone twice in one season.
Yeah.
I mean, these are areas that you can re-injure very easily, and all it takes is one hit. And especially in this division that's very, very competitive, and Oakland, who's a very physical defense.
Yeah, there are a lot of good pass rushers in this division.
I see him. I do agree this far. I don't think he should start. Denver needs to bring him in, though. And it sounds stupid to do, but it kind of makes sense to coach these quarterbacks in a way.
Yeah.
And step in if needed. I don't necessarily think you don't learn by sitting on the bench. Trevor Siemian needs to start. Why? He needs to get this experience. Paxton Lynch needs time to develop. He needs time to learn the book work.
Well, but you just said you don't learn on the bench.
Well, I think Trevor Siemian's a better starter over Paxton Lynch, at least for the next 4 years.
For now, I agree with you.
But a lot of these times you see, Paxton Lynch got time to start. He got some learning experience. We clearly see he needs time to read the book, though, because he doesn't fully understand the routes.
Yeah.
And he got the experience. It showed he wasn't ready, so it was kind of like a test. Can he do it? Sometimes. Look at Dak Prescott. They didn't know what he could do, and what did he do? He turned up and turned the Cowboys franchise upside down.
Uh-huh. In a good way.
Well, yeah. But Romo as the Denver starter is asking for trouble because of at this point, his injury history is too much. And it's bad enough that these guys were put in these positions because of retirement and trade and injuries.
Yeah.
If Siemian never got injured, Paxton Lynch would have never saw the field.
Right.
They did okay for the positions they were put in. Romo coming in to help coach and step in if things are getting out of hand because he's a veteran experience, I can understand that. Starting for Denver, never.
Interesting. We'll see what happens. I don't think they would sign him and not have him start, but maybe they just won't even sign him and roll with. So you're saying roll with Siemian for another year or two and let Paxton Lynch develop some more?
Yes, because I think Siemian has proven he can do it.
Yeah.
Like I said, given the fact of he was never... Osweiler would have been the starter this year. That's why he was there.
Right.
Then he literally took the money and run. There's a reference for you. So all of a sudden, can you imagine waking up and they're like, you're the starting quarterback when you were the third string like a year ago? So for what he did in his position, I think he did well. He got tons of experience. And that's only going to get better with time. Paxton Lynch got some experience due to Siemian's injuries, but once they get ahead, what do? You pull your starting quarterback and you put in your backup. So I think Paxton Lynch will see experience over the next couple seasons, but not as a starter, as a situational quarterback. And I think between the two of them, they can build up something to where they could almost switch off. You know, if you're in the lead or one's struggling, you could plug the other one in because they both look good.
All right. So that's a wrap on the QE conversation. It looks bright, potentially. If not next year, at least a couple years out.
Bright orange.
These guys are going to be good. Yeah, bright orange with a little bit of navy blue. And whoever's at quarterback will be helped out by a pretty strong running game led by C.J. Anderson. This was his second season as the team's starter, and he got off to a pretty good start before tearing his meniscus in Week 7 and eventually not coming back from that.
And from a fantasy standpoint, I didn't know who this guy was when Mike started him against me this year, and it turns out I made terrible decisions not picking him.
He got off to a really good start. He had 437 yards rushing, 4.0 average, and 4 touchdowns, along with 16 catches for another 128 yards and a score. And he's an exciting runner with a ton of speed and lightning fast cuts. And he had surgery for the torn meniscus, and he's expected to be back, or at least close to 100% for 2017. And you never really know with knee injuries. Sometimes they can have more lasting effects. So you never really know if a player is going to quite be the same, but you know, we all have high hopes for CJ.
And there's only one way they're going to fight on. That's when he takes the field next year.
Yep. First time he tries to plant his foot and make a cut.
You'll almost know.
Yeah. Hopefully he'll look like his old self. So once he got hurt, the guy who came in was Devontae Booker. He was a 4th round pick last year, and he took over the starting role once Anderson went down. But honestly, he didn't do much with it. He had 612 rushing yards on 174 carries with just a 3.5 average, which is very low, and 4 touchdowns. His longest run of the season was just 18 yards.
Which kind of surprised me because he looked like he had potential.
Yeah.
But it's like he didn't execute properly.
Right, yeah, I'm not sure what it was. He didn't look explosive the way Anderson does when he gets the ball in his hands.
Now, I don't know if I think you're going to bring him up, but I hate to jump in front of it. Was it Capri Bibbs?
I don't have him on my sheet, but I know who he is. Yeah.
He honestly looked better in terms of execution, and he had a higher yards per attempt at 4.4 than Devontae Booker.
Right.
Which kind of surprised me.
Well, he didn't get that much work, so it's a smaller sample size, and I definitely remember he had a few just super long plays that might skew
His
the average.
longest was 24 yards.
Okay, it must have been a catch I'm thinking of, because he definitely had a 70-plus yard touchdown catch that he took to the house. But you're right, though, about Bibbs. He did look, in limited action, he looked like the more effective runner compared to Booker.
His execution of like his route running, or not route running, but like his lane running style just looked so much crisper and cleaner, and like running with authority. Like, This is my opportunity. I'm taking advantage of it.
Right. Booker was a little tentative almost.
Yeah, he's like, I'm the backup. I know it.
He also, Booker, fumbled 4 times, and 3 of them were recovered by the other team during the season.
Oh, that's
so 4 is a lot for a guy who didn't even start. He only started about half the season, and he had 4 fumbles, which is
that doesn't look good on your.
Well, no. So we'll see what happens. Anderson should be back next year, but it sounds like we're leaning towards maybe having Bibbs as the primary backup, and Booker maybe bumped down a notch. Would you agree with that?
I agree. Oh, you have Justin Forsett, too.
We'll see if they keep him. I think they brought him in because of, in part, how bad Booker was. Mm-hmm. But I
he
think
did all right, but I think they have improvements elsewhere they need to worry about.
Yeah,
so.
and Forsett's an older running back. There was the connection with Kubiak, was another strong reason.
Which is, you understand that's why you bring him in.
Right, so I don't think Forsett will be back with the team next year. But we'll just have to hope for Anderson that he can stay healthy, because there's another season in his career, I think, where he missed most of it due to injury. But when he's out there, he looks great, though. So that'll be good news for this running game and this offense as a whole if he can keep himself on the field next year.
Definitely.
So moving on to the wide receivers.
This is an exciting group.
It is. And Denver relies heavily on the top 2, similar to Oakland in a way, who both had over 1,000 yards. And the next, I thought this stat was for Oakland, but it's for Denver. The next highest pass catcher on their team after Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders, their top two receivers, was Devontae Booker with 265 receiving yards.
That's ridiculous.
It's so low, right?
Well, because if you look at it, it's almost 800 yards difference between Emmanuel Sanders and Devontae Booker.
Right, and that was the next most receiving yards on the team.
Whoa, that's weird.
Yeah. So that's what I mean when I say they rely heavily on the top two receivers. So we'll start with Demaryius Thomas, and I have a trivia question for you.
Uh-oh, not again. Jesus. All right.
Do you know what city he went to high school in? I know you don't. This is so random.
Okay, is it in the United States?
He went to high school in Dublin.
Oh, I wouldn't.
Which is a city in Georgia. Okay, sorry. I just thought that was funny. I guess Matt doesn't agree. Okay, so
I hate you.
Dublin, Georgia. That's where Demaryius Thomas went to high school. So he's in his 7th season, all of them with Denver, and he had his 5th straight year with over 1,000 receiving yards. He had 90 catches, 1,083 yards, and 5 touchdowns. He's the bigger bodied receiver of the two at 6'3", 229 pounds, and he's just a matchup nightmare for defensive backs. His touchdown production, though, weirdly has gone way down the past few seasons. So I mentioned he had 5 this year. He had 6 last year in 2015, compared to 10, 14, and 11 the previous 3 years. And I would blame this mostly on the QB situation. Obviously, this year with Siemian starting, he's no Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning last year was not Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning the previous year was Peyton Manning, and that's why Thomas was good. So,
are you guys following all this?
Yes, I just said Peyton Manning is not Peyton Manning.
I'm sitting 5 feet from him, and I can't figure this out.
It made sense. In my head, anyway.
I'm not even going to try to make a flow chart for that.
The point is, I don't think the issue is
him.
I think it's the quarterback situation.
I agree with that.
And the other guy is Emmanuel Sanders. He's been with Denver for 3 years, and he's also put up over 1,000 yards in each of those seasons. This year, 79 catches, 1,032 yards, and also 5 touchdowns. And he's smaller and quicker than Thomas, but and I think his skill set really complements Thomas's nicely, and these two are just a really awesome duo for whoever the starting quarterback is next year. And the team rarely even uses a third wide receiver. The next highest among receivers on the team was the 30-year-old Jordan Norwood, who had just 21 catches.
And honestly, Norwood, I wasn't as interested in as I was Benny Fowler.
Yeah, I agree, because Fowler's the young guy.
Fowler, I think, would be a great slot receiver. And I think he needs to be utilized more.
Yeah.
He has the potential to aid with drawing some of the coverage, too, off of Sanders and Thomas, allowing them, obviously, again, I see no reason why they won't have another 1,000-yard season each next year.
Yeah, I think they should.
But I think they need to get Benny Fowler involved more.
Yeah, that sounds
I just like what I saw with him more than I did with Jordan Norwood. Fowler has great sideline awareness from what I saw.
Right, and with a guy like Norwood, there's no upside there. He's just a guy to plug in. Whereas Fowler, there is upside, and you could see him grow into a big threat, potentially.
And actually, it's almost like you could groom him to eventually take one of the two guys' place. Because unfortunately, nobody plays NFL forever.
Right.
So that's definitely something that I personally would like to see as Fowler more involved. But I see no reason why Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders won't have 1,000-yard seasons again.
Yeah, I would expect that again.
We'll talk about consistency.
Yeah, they're very consistent. So moving on to tight end, where they haven't had much consistency. Since the days of Julius Thomas, I would say the Broncos haven't had much of a receiving threat at the position. They've got Virgil Green. He led the tight ends in catches with just 22 for 237 yards and just 1 touchdown. And he's a decent blocker too, and that's more what they ask their tight ends to do these days. Both in the run and the pass game, Green is pretty good. They also have a guy named Jeff Hewerman, and he's also an okay blocker who doesn't catch passes. So they really rely on these wide receivers because they don't. And I think C.J. Anderson was a big loss because that's one thing he does really well is catch passes. Mm-hmm. And he definitely would have had a bigger impact than what Booker did. If
He would have been higher up on this receptions list.
Right. So it's too bad, especially with young quarterbacks. It helps out so much to have a capable pass-catching back you can as a safety outlet.
Mm-hmm. Especially because usually that's where your tight ends come in, but since they don't utilize their tight ends, you need your backs to be able to step up.
Yep. And then taking a look at the O-line, it was pretty bad. They were bottom half in the league as a group. The only real bright spot, I would say, is their center, Matt Paradis. Paradise? There's no E on the end. But he's in his second season, and he made a huge leap from his rookie year. That he's one of the league's best centers already. Right tackle was a big issue for them, though, with Donald Stevenson and Ty Sambrailo. They kind of rotated around because they were both so bad. They would bench one, start the other, but then he was even worse, so they put the first guy back in. It's an issue that needs to be addressed. And that's about all I got on the offense here.
Well, yeah, and that led to Siemian being sacked 31 times. That's almost 2 per game.
Right.
Which doesn't sound bad in terms, but obviously that's just an average. But there are going to be games where you get sacked 5 times versus games that you don't get sacked at all.
And he didn't even start off the games. That was just in 14 games.
Oh, that's true. Well, and then they allowed Paxton Lynch to get sacked 9 times. So
okay, so in total they were over 40
sacks against their quarterbacks. Right. Not a good situation if you're a quarterback.
No, and they've also got Russell Okung at left tackle, who they got from Seattle, and I think has been a disappointment there. He's a free agent this year, so wouldn't be surprised to see them let him go, but they need to address both tackle spots.
And of the combine research I've done, there are really good defensive tackles, but I think if they could possibly make a switch to the offensive tackle. They're bigger guys, but I've seen a lot of physicalness, like athleticism from them, which is what you need on your offensive tackles.
That's important for a tackle, yeah.
So I would suggest that they look to the draft.
Sounds good. You got some defensive notes for us?
So the Denver defense has been the talk for the past couple of years.
Yeah.
There are 3 big players that we'll get to, but they pride themselves on their aggressiveness, and it shows. 18.6 points allowed per game, which was 4th. 316 total yards, which was 4th, which isn't bad.
Yeah.
They were number 1 against the pass, only allowing an average of 185 passing yards per game.
Wow.
But what burned them was the run. They were 28th in the league against the run, allowing 130 rushing yards.
That's an amazing split. Best in the league against the pass, almost worse in the league
against the rush.
Yeah.
And I put down they're aggressive. They bite really easily. They're very quick off the snap. And I don't think they allow a time to adjust for situations. And by the time they realize what's happening, it's too late. A lot of that comes off of their dominant edge rusher of Von Miller himself. 6th season in the league. He's 27 years old. He is a name known just throughout the league.
Oh, yeah. He was the MVP a few years ago, or maybe just he was Defensive Player of the Year a few years ago. He's just a sack monster.
78 sacks with 78 tackles with 13 and a half sacks, 3 forced fumbles, and 3 passes deflected. He's the type of player that even if he didn't have these numbers coming up the next few years, that everybody still would be very wary of.
Yeah.
Because he is 27, so he's starting to get in the middle of the age there. Young enough to where he's got potential, but he's starting to get towards the top of that crest where eventually you're going to need to keep your eyes open.
Yeah.
But I don't see why he's not going to continue his dominance in his position. The person that I think, though, that they need to start looking at and keeping a close eye on that I see is declining is Talib, one of their cornerbacks. This is his 9th season in the NFL. He's 31 years old. 43 tackles, 12 pass defended, 3 interceptions, 1 return for a touchdown. But all of that is down from the previous season.
He's a very physical corner. This whole secondary is really. But
he's the type of physical, and I didn't write down the penalty count, but he's the type of physical player that gets himself in trouble.
Yep. There was one game, I forget if this is last year or a previous year, where after a play he reached inside an opponent's helmet's face mask and poked him in the eye. Like that's the kind of player Talib is.
This is also the player that shot himself.
Yeah.
And I don't even have words to describe this.
Pull the Plaxico. River Plaxico burst.
Google that one if you don't know.
Yeah.
And I'm not even worried about those types of antics.
No.
It just, as a performance against opponents, he doesn't seem to have the same speed.
Right, and that's important is speed when you try to play that physical press man coverage, because if you get beaten slightly, if he gets around your press coverage, that's when you need the speed to get back into position. And at age 31, you mentioned he might be losing that a little bit.
I'm seeing a decline in his performance. Like last year, he was there. He was good. He was the physicalness he needed to be. And you don't expect a drastic change, but you're starting to see the numbers fade. And it's a position I think they want to start addressing now.
Yeah.
Because I only see him having a couple more good years within him. Before, like we talked about with Revis, before he was cut with the Jets, Charles Woodson, where they went from corners to safeties.
Right.
Give him a little bit more of a relaxed position, come up and make the tackle versus having to chase. But he's definitely someone I want to keep an eye on. But another household name, however, happens to be my free agent that Mike and I are going to have a little bit of a discussion about, and that's DeMarcus Ware.
Ooh.
As much as Von Miller is a name, DeMarcus Ware is just as big.
Yeah, I remember when they signed him from Dallas a few years ago. It was a big deal because he was so productive there.
The only, and I hate to say this about a great guy because I like DeMarcus Ware.
Yeah.
He's, even at age 34, he's a very physical player. The downside is he's never played a full season with Denver. He's been plagued by nagging injuries. He's just, I think the age, and I hate saying this phrase, but the age is showing.
And it was a back injury last year, I believe. That's the kind of thing that can flare up again at any time.
This year, this is his 12th season in the league, which I did not know that. I didn't think he was around that long.
Yeah.
And then to see this, I was like, wow. He had 15 tackles. He had 4 sacks and a pass defense. So he did his job, but I think he's getting to the point where he is not James Harrison. He is showing his age.
Yeah.
And it's just sad to see because I do like him as a player. I think he's a great player. You know, like you said, he was very productive in Dallas. He came to Denver, and he's been productive, but I think at this point he's getting to that cusp of age is taking over. Personally, I think that, and this is where the debate starts,
Yep.
they've got people with the potential to take over. I think they should at least give him one more year to make sure, because the last thing you want to do is release a player that's good, but obviously getting rusty, have the next person behind him step up full time and all of a sudden realize that was a bad choice. 1 year to play a rotational role with Mike's counter argument.
Yeah, my counter argument is a guy named Shane Ray.
That's kind of a cool name, not gonna lie.
It is a cool name, yeah. He's got 2 first names. That's always cool. So Ray is a young guy, and this is when you have to make the decision between letting the veteran go so that the young guy can get more reps. But Ray is another defensive end, and he started several games this year, not all of them. He played in a rotational role with Ware, I would say. But he appeared in every single game, didn't start all of them, but he just looked really good when he's on the field. He had 48 tackles, 8 sacks, and a forced fumble. And if you remember from the Bengals video, when I was talking about Andrew Whitworth, their right tackle, or left tackle, Ray was the one who gave him more trouble than even Von Miller did, and actually got 2 sacks of Andy Dalton against Whitworth. Ray, and I mean this in a nice way, he's a nasty guy. He is strong, he's fast, he can bull rush even from the outside. He's just really strong, and I think he's ready to be a full-time starter. And that's why I think they can let Ware go safely. And now we're fighting on the floor right now.
I just think that they may just want to make sure, the numbers show yes, but how many times have the numbers said one thing, they get in the full-time starting position, and then the numbers don't show that? Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying completely re-sign DeMarcus Ware to a 2-year, 3-year contract. I'm saying give him 1 more year to make sure that when the switch happens, everybody is on the yes. There is not a single shred of doubt. In a more rotational with DeMarcus Ware,
Yeah.
where they see almost even playing time, will give you the perfect balance of saying, yes, he's ready. Because if you can keep on the stat sheet, he obviously did better than DeMarcus Ware overall, but that's, like I said, DeMarcus Ware is 34.
Mm-hmm.
But I think
Ray's 23.
Yeah, I think you just want to make sure that they're ready. You know, I hate when teams jump the gun a little early. They release a veteran, aging or not, they plug in a young guy, and all of a sudden things go to hell in a handbasket. Because you go from a rotational role into a full-time starting. And Ware saw more time overall still because obviously they're paying him the veteran wage.
Right.
But I think with a 1-year deal, this puts everybody on the same page of they know what's going on. DeMarcus Ware understands this is my last year with you. I understand what's going on. Ray gets put in a position where he now acknowledges that he has 1 year to prove.
It's almost like a final audition before he gets the full-time
Exactly.
starting role.
Because if he shows he does about the same, or if he declines a little bit, I'm not saying it's a panic mode, but that kind of makes him wake up and realize next year you're in this spot. You know, DeMarcus Ware still is capable of putting numbers up, but he's obviously showing at age 34 he is ready to relax in Cancun with an umbrella drink.
Yeah.
But I just like teams to make sure, because this is a big defensive team. This is the team that you want to see that defense year after year after year so strong while the offense is getting its feet planted.
Right.
And I just don't want them to make a mistake because they already are bad against the rush. And I don't want to see them make a mistake that causes them to be bad against the pass, because now they still have to plan for DeMarcus Ware as long as he's on the roster. Offenses do.
Yeah.
And that might help Ray out a little bit because they're not anticipating Ray as much.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. We're still productive enough.
Yeah, like I said, nothing extended, but just enough to where, I like the way you put that, a final audition. Like, this is your chance to prove that next year you get this spot.
Yeah.
Because Ware's a player that it's going to be sad to see him go.
Right.
Especially when you have Ware and Von Miller in that defense together.
Yeah, they're a fun combination.
But I know Von Miller's the type of guy that he'll be like, yeah, he's cool. I'll work with Ray. But I think 1 more year on DeMarcus Ware to give a more of an even role split with him and Ray to make sure that Ray is ready. Because at 24, you want to be able to put, 6-year contract on this kid because you know he's that ready. So that's how I feel.
Sounds good to me. Is that all we've got on the defense?
I think that's it. I think it's time for the you-know-what.
TLDW. Too long, didn't watch. So
I never watch.
All we need is the click, so we get the count. That's all we need. You don't have to actually watch. So the Denver Broncos were 9-7 this year, third in the AFC West. They had 2 different guys play quarterback at some point in the year. 2 young guys, in Trevor Siemian and Paxton Lynch. Siemian looked pretty good. Lynch did not, but Lynch is the rookie. They're both going to be growing up and learning with this offense. They have a capable running game with C.J. Anderson, but he got hurt this year, and it didn't look like the backups were prepared for a full-time role. Pair of great receivers in Thomas and Sanders. They have offensive line issues. They're going to need to address both tackle positions this offseason. And how about on the defensive side, Matt?
Defense is starting to show signs of some age. They're not terrible. They were number 1 against the rush, but they were 28th against. Thank you. First against the pass, 28th against the rush. Von Miller, as good as he's ever been, obviously.
Yep.
Aqib Talib, another big name, but he's starting to show that maybe they need to start watching him and maybe consider moving him to a safety position. But the other big name is DeMarcus Ware, who's a free agent. Ray looks like he's ready to step up, according to everything Mike said. I think that Ware needs 1 more year, just a 1-year deal, to evenly split the playing time between Ray and Ware to make sure that this switch, when it happens, is seamless and it's ready so that they can maintain the type of physical defense they have. He does look ready by the numbers, but being a rotational player versus a full-time starter is a whole new mindset. So, other than that, the defense should still look good. I think they keep most of these pieces intact. I don't see why they don't sit where they are now. They just need to work on their rush stop, and that's just due to over-aggressiveness.
Overall, this team has the makings of being a competitor again next year. Presumably, they'll have C.J. Anderson the whole year, which will obviously help out the running game. It'll help out the passing game. Both these quarterbacks are gonna develop over the offseason and come back better than they were this year. And they're going to be another fun team to watch in this division. And I think that's it.
That's
Closes
all
the
we
book
have.
on the Denver Broncos.
Thank you guys all for being a part of this. It was a lot of fun. Denver is, a team everybody talks about, former Super Bowl champions, the whole 9 yards. Leave your comments below about how you feel this defense should be reworked, because I believe that's where some of their problem is. I think offense is just development and chemistry. There's no major issues. Maybe the offensive line, but that's half the league. But do you think Siemian or Paxton Lynch deserve to start, or what about the possibility of Tony Romo coming in? Debate that down below.
Yeah, let's get some thoughts on that.
If you have any questions or anything, you feel free to email us. It's in the description below. Check out our Twitter handle.
At 2M_football.
Underscore is crucial. And we will see you guys all next time.
See ya.